Today we're going to talk about an agent who is dying. An agent that was never really good, but no one seemed to know. But now finally people are starting to know, because today we're talking about Breach. Now I've been going through some of the Stage 2 data for Breach, and Breach's non-mirror win rate in Stage 2 is around 31%. So when one team plays Breach and the other team does not, the team that does not play Breach has about a 70% chance of winning that map, which obviously isn't great. And this has started to bear out in some of the pick rates as well. Breach's pick rates in general are pretty down. And if we take a look at the best region in Valorant, Pacific, they seem to be very much on this train of understanding the Breach isn't very good because his pick rate is 2% in Pacific. Okay, so we are down here with the agents, I mean, obviously Teo's there newly as well, but, also with the agents that just really never get played, right? Breach is down here at 2%, which is way lower than Breach ever has been before. And in the other regions, it's not quite as extreme as Pacific, but still, the numbers are heavily down from where we were during, say, the Teo meta. But if you're a long-time fan of this channel, you'll know that this is where I think Breach should have been this whole time, because Breach has always been this bad. And if you are familiar with this channel, you'll be familiar with my statistical breakdown videos, where you'll be used to seeing things like this. The overall non-mirror win rates of all of the agents, this one is taken from Stage 1, so like the Teo meta kind of area. And Breach is down here at 44%. Now, this is the thing. This is actually a high number for Breach, right? Still the lowest in the game. Still the worst agent in the game who had a significant sample size. Yeah, of course he is. And he always has been down here at the bottom, right? Normally he hovers around 40%. Which again, obviously is terrible. And that 44%, which is an improvement for Breach, was during the Teo meta when almost everyone was playing Breach on a lot of different maps. And so my argument for the longest time is that Breach has been the agent where the perception of how strong he is and the reality of how strong he is perhaps the most warped. Because Breach's pick rate historically has always been at least pretty decent. And now for the first time, we're starting to actually see that unravel somewhat. But why is Breach not as good, potentially, as you may think, particularly at a high level? Well, the first thing is, we can go and look at some of his utility and figure out some of it just isn't that useful. Let's, for instance, take the flashes, and I'm going to show you this clip from a classic EDG clutch.
They're not really in a position here.
He's still going for it. He believes in himself, and I can see why. Already managing to clear out Cloud. Smoggy up top is going to put it into a 1v2. And this is the man you'd want in that scenario, but both players up above. A flash ready. Dodges it! What? Truly unbelievable!
And so there is part number one of this. Breach flashes at pro level just are not very good. They are a mild inconvenience to pro players, right? You very, very rarely will see someone who gets fully blinded by a Breach flash. Right, particularly if it's not comboed with some other utility that they're also having to potentially turn away from or shoot, right? It just doesn't happen. This happens all the time. Pro players will all the time turn flashes, right? And it's not just Breach flashes, to be honest. I would say in general, we have seen that, most flashes, pros are just really good at turning pretty much all the flashes, right? They just aren't maybe as strong as you think that they are because pros are so good at turning them. And in fact, we have seen like elements of this sneaking into comp theory as well, right? Take a team like Gen G, who are quite happy to play quite a few comps without any flashes whatsoever, right? Of course, we are seeing kind of a Yoru meta develop, so, teams are playing with Yoru and therefore do have flashes in their comps for the most part when they do play Yoru, but there are teams who don't play as much Yoru, like Gen G, who are just like, yeah, we'll just go without it, and we'll be fine. And we'll still be one of the best teams in the world, because flashes in general just don't do as much as you might think. The next thing to understand about Breach is something that we all have inherently known for an extremely long amount of time, which is that stuns are cosmetic, as Sideshow will now show us, and I will react to this to make this transformative so that Sideshow doesn't sue me.
Oh, that is an alpha. That is an alpha kill. That is
alpha moment.
That is a verified alpha moment.
No longer on fraud watch. Wait.
Where's the trade? Where's the trade? Where's the trade?
Hello, 11 seconds.
They lost a player to Shin.
Gonna cross into the side. 11 seconds. Gonna cross. Flash.
Shin's
Nobody
full
peeks.
blind.
Safe plan.
Oh, he's stunned. Oh, it's over. Oh,
No, what? Cosmetic stun.
What am I watching? What is this? Hey, man.
Okay, that was a great reaction there, so that Sideshow can't sue me. But as you just saw, and as we have all known for a very long time, stuns are cosmetic, and stuns in general do not mean that you're going to get that kill that you definitely should get, and Breach, of course, is perhaps the agent that suffers this more than any other. The next thing to talk about is why this is happening now, though. Why is Breach's pick rate suddenly, for the first time, really reaching kind of, new lows like we saw in Pacific with only a 2% pick rate? Well, that's because in Riot's infinite wisdom, they decided to, whilst they were nerfing an agent that severely needed a nerf, they also just decided to nerf his friend, who also was not very good to begin with, right? And they changed this fault line detonate from 1 to 1.2 seconds. Now, here's the thing. You might look at that and be like, that's not a big deal, right? That's just a very small nerf. Who really cares, right? That's what you might think about that. But there are 2 points to this that I do want to make. One, that actually is maybe a bigger deal than you sometimes think, and we'll get into that in a second. But 2, even just the psychological thing of Breach has been nerfed, I think does contribute to why Breach's pick rate is starting to suddenly decline in some of these regions. But there are some moments that you will see, like I'm about to show you in this crew game, where people are able to do things with that 0.2 of a second that they otherwise might not have been able to get away with before.
Buff. Release a rifle round out for the defensive end. Only a stinger is the weakest weapon, and one more time Verdi moves towards long and gets instant.
So let's look at this round again then from Loud versus Crew, and we see here a great example of this Breach stun, just being just a bit of a nuisance for Dante, right? Like, he has the time now to avoid, get out. Have you seen someone really do this before? I couldn't remember many examples of that happening before, right? Where someone has fully dodged that Breach stun and feels like they can actually challenge ahead of it and get the kill. And we're playing Yoru, so then I can just get out because, hey, we're playing an actual good agent, right? Like, yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? That's really crazy to see. And the thing is as well, one thing I do want to talk about Breach, and we are going to take a look at this game in a bit more detail as well, and watch Loud try and fight A main and prove that Breach isn't very good, is where this Breach is stunning from, right? Because you might be like, oh, doesn't normally a Breach like stand here and stun? Well, yeah, kind of historically, you might assume that Breach, would be here, and you might think like, oh, that stun might catch them, whatever. The problem is, if Crew commit to this heavy fight here on A, right? Like, if they did really want to go for this fight, here's another problem with Breach, that, like, you want your Breach to at least be somewhat close so that they can maybe join it if, Crew are going for a full 5-stack fight. So instead, you are going to put the Breach here in the modern day because you're worried about that. Because if your Breach is here and then you lose this fight on A, well, then it's like, well, what was the point, right? But this is now possible. There are moments like this, on maps like Haven or wherever else you might play Breach, where just that 0.2 of a second does make a difference. And I can maybe do something like that otherwise I might not have been able to do before and potentially get away with it. But now let's quickly take a look at some other examples of Loud trying to fight A main with Breach here on Haven and it not going so well for them.
So far in 2025 in the lead here.
Standing ahead.
And the matchup against Loud.
And now let's take a look at another example from round 7.
At the window was definitely stopped in their tracks. Yeah. Drone come from the top. Hunters here on the attack. Verdi taken down.
Oh, they know there's going to be a push again, and the fight will ensue here towards the sewers in A lobby.
So again, yes, Loud aren't very good, but this is the exact problem you can run into if, for instance, you do have your Breach kind of towards B instead, is if, Crew did go for like a big fight here where, we've got 5 people here, you are in some trouble, right? And this time the stun does somewhat connect, and then once my duelist is dead, we decide to ult and run in on our own, right? Whilst my Silver is nowhere near either, so now I'm just running in on my own, and we die to someone who is stunned, because again, stuns are cosmetic, right? So again, you're starting to see that this Breach agent might not be so good. And oh, by the way, one of the main reasons that Breach has historically been meta on Haven is for this, right? Is so that you can fight this as the defenders. Like, literally, this is one of the things that people were like, oh, this is why Breach is good on this map, right? Because it gives you this stun down here, and you can try and control this bit of the map, right? And then, kind of make the map a bit smaller and put 4 people over here and just get 1 person here. Well, as hopefully these clips have kind of shown you, that doesn't work in 2025. There are better ways of doing it now, potentially with, the ISO suppress coming down here, with the vulnerable, with the shock dart, right? That's potentially a much bigger threat than a Breach stun is in 2025. So basically, the point is, Breach isn't that good of an option. But then finally, and one of my main theories as to why Breach has historically been pretty bad in terms of his win rate, is because he doesn't match up very well at all with double controller. I'm just going to play this round here from Fnatic versus Team Liquid. That's actually from 2024, but it gives you a decent example of what I'm talking about, right? Which is number one, what just happened right here. We just saw Kiko come up here. He did manage to get a kill, but then he dies, right? And this is the problem that Breach has against double controller comps, is that you end up setting up maybe just your duelist, but it is just your duelist, right? So if this guy dies, all of that util that you use, and he did manage to get a kill here, but, you know, in some instances, your duelist will just die. Well, then you just use all that util and send one person in, but they're just completely sectioned off from the rest of your team, right? So no one else can go and help them, right? And that will happen pretty commonly against double controller. And obviously with Breach and the way his flashes work as well, right? You can't pop flash through, you know, a Viper wall or whatever, right? Or through a smoke. And so he just doesn't match up well in these kind of scenarios. And we've seen a lot of these kind of games, right? Which is, you know, the Fnatic comp, which is what they're playing, of course, with the Viper versus kind of a Breach, you know, double initiator comp here on Lotus. These sort of matchups have happened a lot throughout the history of Lotus. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's extremely one-sided for the double controller comps. They have always absolutely, this is like taking candy from a baby. But I think it makes a lot of sense, and we're going to see it here later on in this round as well, this final round of this game, where we get into this retake, and Yampi's going to stun, and it's like, well, when your duelist is dead, you're just stunning through smokes. You're not doing anything, right? Like, you're just, nothing's happening. Like, there's nothing to come from it, and you've just done nothing. And this is the thing, right? Against double controller, which has always been good, but particularly now as well, right? We find ourselves kind of in a double controller meta, even though, again, double controller was always good. It just, you know, it just doesn't work. There really is no point to play Breach at this moment in time because there is definitely better options. There are a ton of better options than Breach. And as I say, some regions like Pacific have kind of figured it out. There are some other regions where Breach does have a higher pick rate. But the long and short of all of this is to say that Breach is terrible right now. Never play Breach.